Most critics writing about Avengers Infinity War praised the movie for depicting an oppressive defeat, a unique characteristic in the superhero genre. Marvel took incredible risks, offering little hope beyond the promise of a resolving chapter. So I want to ask a question. Would the ending have been so successful had the movie come out before the 2016 election? I don't think the question is very fair because I'm pretty sure people would have loved the movie regardless. Cliffhangers aren't anything new after all. However, asking the question can lead to an interesting reading of both Infinity War and Endgame. As Winter Soldier and Civil War eerily reflected the political climates in which they were made, I want to see how these later Marvel entries reflect their times, and how they may even predict or act as a warning for the times to come. Thanos is pretty easy to see as Trump. However, the right certainly has their takes on him.
All social justice warriors, lefties, libtards, or whatever you want to call them have the same wet dream to live in a world where humanity lives in perfect harmony with the environment. All things are equal and perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Sound familiar? Infinity War is really about the war against dangerous leftist ideologies. It's about one man or alien believing he knows best and choosing to.
Like Trump, Thanos is a laughable, strange-colored monster brooding on the edge of a long story, seen by most as another caricature to be easily defeated.
There's not going to be a President Donald Trump. That's not going to happen.
Both are charismatic and persuasive.
Crust burst.
I mean, why else for all of this? Thanos constantly defies our expectations and breaks rules set by the larger narrative. Constantly, he is underestimated by his enemies.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president.
Thanos comes to power through a gradual process that only seems unstoppable after it can no longer be stopped. And most significantly, Thanos is wrong. Renegade Cut made a fantastic essay about this specific subject, so I suggest you check it out if you still need to be convinced. I guess what most connects the 2016 election to the events of Infinity War is this sense of defeat, particularly the defeat of those so confident in winning. The Trump-Thanos comparison is pretty obvious, so I want to focus more on the Avengers themselves, who have stood as a type of neoliberal safeguard throughout the 2010s. Much has been said about the superhero genre as a sort of fantasy of the benevolent dictator, a desire to jettison democracy for a faith in a supposedly superior human. If anything separates the Avengers from this reading, it's that the Avengers act as an organized coalition most of the time, and don't completely operate outside of the government. The Obama years brought a sense of normalcy to many liberals, but a shakeup of the political system he was not. Like the Avengers, Obama's administration put band-aids on problems without fully solving them.
You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change.
Or set out to fix what had been broken in their own efforts to remedy the issue. Obamacare was a far cry from reforming the healthcare system. Hawk-like international policies were carried over from the Bush era.
Civilians were killed that shouldn't have been.
Economic inequality increased while climate change was exacerbated.
Thanks, Obama.
But at least Obama was there, a figure of decency and strength, a steady head of state, the guardian of the best neoliberal values our world had to offer. Problems plagued the world, but at least the Avengers were there to usually return things back to the way they were. The MCU eerily reflected isolated political situations in the 2010s, Winter Soldier coming out soon after the Snowden scandal, and Civil War coming out before one of the most divisive elections in American history. While the Avengers are there to stop threats with strength and ingenuity, the true danger was always lurking just beneath the surface. Tony could feel it.
That up there, that's the Endgame.
And yet the Avengers could only solve the immediate issues, not the underlying problems. The Avengers prove unsuccessful in dealing with the fundamental issues that plague their society. When an outsider arrives who offers a solution to the problems, however wrong he may be, he proves unstoppable. Thanos, of course, wasn't elected to anything and really doesn't convince anybody throughout the course of the films.
You don't know that!
But the problems he is addressing are those that matter, and are generally relegated outside of the MCU. Poverty, starvation, symptoms of capitalism. Like Trump, Thanos identified the problems, and like Trump, the solutions were dead wrong. Trump's solution was to demonize immigrants, stoke racial resentment, easy when so many are angry. Thanos' solution was to eliminate half of all life in the universe. Thanos is a fascist, while the Avengers are sort of like a benevolent oligarchy. If we see Tony as the leader, the group is sort of like an Elon Musk tech daddy fantasy. Check out Philosophy Tube, by the way. Let's just say the Avengers aren't socialists. They could never be, based on the company that creates them. In our world, they'd be the type to see capitalism not as a problem in itself.
We're capitalist, and that's just the way it is.
Was it surprising that a force of heroes ignoring the underlying issues of society were defeated by a villain who wants to fix those ills? Thanos, like the Avengers, understands capitalism as a truth of the world.
America will never be a socialist country.
Like Trump, his diagnosis misunderstands the heart of the problem, which is the nature of capitalism, not that there are too many mouths to feed. His illogical solution is one that would make sense to those that don't understand capitalism. What happened in 2016 was the absolute worst-case scenario to many people. The defeat left a vacancy and still leaves a vacancy in the hearts of many whose way of living is threatened every day Trump is in the White House. As 2020 approaches, it feels a bit like the build-up to the release of Avengers Endgame. There's a ton of anticipation and a ton of guessing. Trump, like Thanos, has to be defeated. And will. It's inevitable. Everyone thinks so, right? But how? This is what we were asking before we sat down in theaters after a year of waiting to watch Endgame. We knew Thanos would get defeated. But how? Endgame is amazing filmmaking. I cheered like everyone else did at the big moments. I laughed, I cried. It was everything I wanted it to be. But it's a movie that sours the longer I think about it. Not because I'm obsessed with its inconsistent time travel logic or anything, but because its political subtext is mildly upsetting. If the snap was the 2016 election, Endgame is 2020. Thanos won, and we have to undo it. And if the Avengers stand as the neoliberal old guard and democratic establishment, then their solution is a problem. Because their solution is, well, literal fucking time travel. I can't think of a more perfect metaphor for what the old guard Democrats want in 2020 than literal time travel.
My Lord.
When good candidates are actually proposing ideas to rid the country of the problems that created Trump, the Democratic establishment continues to push their weakened, beleaguered base toward candidates whose only vision for America is to return to a state of normalcy.
Return to the essence of who we are.
We got Trump because the state of normalcy was inadequate for everybody. We got Trump because the neoliberal approach to capitalism had been failing the world for decades. The Avengers world is different from our own, of course. I mean, they lost 50% of the population. Yet, somehow watching them succeed in returning the world to normal while destroying Thanos feels wrong. Maybe I feel jaded. Maybe it's because we haven't defeated our own Thanos yet. Maybe it's because I know that trying to turn the clock back to the Obama years is the wrong solution. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy that could work only for the Avengers.
What do you think the single biggest difference would be between an Obama White House and a Biden White House?
In terms of hopefully acting and dealing with integrity and dealing with, look,
When so many actually believe this fantasy in our real world, seeing it depicted so expertly on screen just bothers me. I hope that in 2020 we defeat our own Thanos and without time travel, because let's face it, we could never go back to the Obama years. Time travel, literal and metaphorical, is just impossible. While the Avengers brought back the population and defeated Thanos, their world and all of the MCU is going to be different too, and I hope it reflects that in the upcoming films. We can't pretend that this fantasy of returning to normal will save us, that anything except a new direction and a new approach to capitalism will defeat our Thanos. Endgame was made by one of the largest companies in the world. The stories they tell matter. The messages they carry, overt or not, matter. And Endgame reflects a very dangerous fantasy, which is maybe why it's so satisfying. It's satisfying to see the old heroes we love get a second shot to defeat the big bad man.
I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
But in the real world, it doesn't work like that. And I only hope that before 2020, Democrats stop fantasizing and wake up.
How are you going to get those voters?
Well, I think just by making the case that we have to restore dignity to work. When's the last time we went out and thanked the guy who kept the sewer from overflowing and going into your basement? He said, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity.